And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another VFL Vantage. I know it has been a long time since we've been able to sit down and talk VFL. So much has happened. 6 rounds have come and gone, and we are ready for finals. It is final season. It is so great to be here and joining me as always. Great to see him, Mr. Brendan Rhodes. Brendan, great to see you, sir. How are you going?
Great to be back, Donnie. And yeah, you can smell finals in the act. You can probably see there, no jumper. So
Yep.
it's starting to warm up a little bit, which is the way it should be. And yeah, it's a long time. It's fair to say that everything has happened between our last chat and today.
All right. Well, let's jump right in to the teeth of it. I know it's been a little bit since the last time that we talked. If I see correctly, we need to jump back to round 16. I know it's a whiles away, but let's jump back to it. Round 16. We're going to fly through these as much as we possibly can because we have so much to talk about, including the women's final as well. So, really quickly, we'll go through the men's, we'll recap the women's finals, and then we will get ready for the men's final. So here we go, round 16, jumping back. Sydney Swans get a win over the Richmond Tigers 88-67. Footscray knocks off Collingwood 97-77. The Suns keep their impressive record going 144-37 over the Frankston Dolphins. Lions beat the Bull Ants 145-17. The Box Hill Hawks knock off the Giants 89-75. Carlton with a smashing over the Coburg Lions 123-71. Werribee continuing its strong form, getting a 74-51 win over Port Melbourne. The Seagulls, Williamstown gets a nice win over the Sharks 63-56, and the Casey Demons knocking off the Sandringham Zebras 93-59. And rounding out the round, finally, 101-58, the North Melbourne Roos beat the Cats. I know this is a little whiles back, Brendan. I'm sorry to make you go back so far. What your thoughts on round 16? Unfortunately, a lot of smashings in this round.
It was a full round of 10 games. As you said, it took a while to get through, telling everyone about them. The Swans, I think it was their third win of the season. It might have only been the second win of the season. And it was against a Richmond team that had knocked off the top team at that stage in the Brisbane Lions the week before, or were about to knock off the Brisbane Lions, which was a massive surprise. And it looked like the Tigers were going to miss the finals at that stage. The Suns kept going on their merry way, as you said. The poor old Northern Bull Ants, they lost their best two players mid-season, two best tall players mid-season, one to the draft who went to Hawthorn in Brandon Ryan, and Tyson Young went travelling overseas, his replacement. So it left them with no height in the forward line and
Mm-hmm.
no ability to score, which made things very hard for them in the second half of the year. A Werribee kept marching on, as you said. Southport just couldn't get their season going, and North Melbourne and Casey were actually flying at this stage. Both were in contention for the top four. North Melbourne had moved into the six for the first time with their sixth consecutive win, beating the Cats. And as we'll see in future weeks, it all changed.
Definitely, for sure. Jumped around 17 again. I'm trying not to go super quick on this, but we have so much to talk about. So the Footscray Bulldogs get a 118-56 win over the Swans. The Tigers go up to Southport and get a nice little win over Southport 98-85. Werribee, another strong performance, smashing the Bull Ants 161-17. The Box Hill Hawks survive a test by North Melbourne 73-68. GWS Giants survive the Frankston Dolphins 55-54. And the Essendon Bombers get a win over the Geelong Cats 64-54. I know the score is low, but was this game between Frankston and GWS is cracking as the final score, or is Frankston kicking themselves with 18 behinds kicked and just falling short of the Giants in this one?
Definitely kicking themselves there, Frankston were. And 6-18 they kicked. Some of the goals they missed were absolutely woeful. They did actually have a kick after the siren to win this game, but it was actually knocked back Alir style about 30 centimetres inside the line, which was one of the very few that they actually had on target. So they were about say 50 centimetres away from beating the Giants, which would have been a terrific upset for them down at Kinetic Stadium. The only other key there, Essendon's win down at Geelong pretty much was where we knew that the Cats weren't going to make the finals, and we really started to be worried about the Sharks when they couldn't beat Richmond up there in Queensland.
Yeah, definitely. You would think that Queensland would had been such a great home for them, at least last year. Losing home games really, really hurts. We jump to round 18, sees the Seagulls knock off Essendon 69-63. The Box Hill Hawks knock off Richmond 84-81. Brisbane with a nice win over the Cats 112-77. Carlton beat Port Melbourne 105-69. KC beat the Coburg Lions 95-53. Werribee with another century scored 109-65 over the Dolphins. Footscray smashing the Bull Ants 161-4. Yes, 4, I said. So Gold Coast Suns go to GWS and get a win 119-79, and Collingwood beat the Sandringham Zebras 64-48. I mean, a great couple of games to start off the round with the Seagulls beating Essendon and Box Hill aging out the Tigers. 6 points and 3 points. Nice little start to the round.
They were the big ones, and that Williamstown game was actually a monumental game that we'd never seen before and we'll never see again. That was when Ben Jolly, Williamstown great, played his 303rd VFL game, which made him the all-time VFA VFL games record holder, and yeah, beating a record that had stood since the early 1980s of 302, which was held by Billy Swan, the father of Collingwood great Dane Swan, who also played for Williamstown, but mostly for Port Melbourne. So that was a great result for the Seagulls to get out of jail in that game. Box Hill and Richmond, that was an absolute cracker. They went goal for goal pretty much all the way through, with the Hawks holding on, pretty much where they managed to secure their top 4 spot in the end. The Bulldogs setting records against the Bull Ants, unfortunately, and the Suns just kept rolling on.
Definitely. It's just been kind of crazy just looking at this, and so many great results. And what a great performance there. 303 games in the VFA, VFL. Congratulations there for sure. And it seems like my iPad decided to go, so now I'm trying to catch up to where we are. So we are at round 19 now. Okay, sorry about that. A little technical difficulty on the fly here sometimes, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologize. So round 19, we jump to Port Melbourne, get a win over Coburg 80-70. Gold Coast Suns beat the Lions 92-74 in the Q Clash v the VFL style. Collingwood knock off their old rivals Carlton 100-72. Mox Hill beats the Sandringham 121-74. Southport, with the Battle of the Aquatic Mammals, beats the Frankston Dolphins 71-57. Williamstown with a nice 1-point win over the KC Demons 75-74. Geelong with a smashing over Northern Bull Ants, my apologies, 132-42. Sydney with a nice smashing over Essendon 126-44. And Werribee rounding out the round with another smashing, a 110-53 win over the North Melbourne Roos. Seagulls getting a win at Casey. I gotta say, that's pretty impressive.
And very rare as well. You don't see Casey, well, you didn't see Casey lose at home very often over the last 7 or 8 years. But amazingly, as we'll get to in the next couple of weeks, that was the third of the 4 games that they've lost at home this year, which is why they find themselves playing off this weekend instead of having a week off. So very, very much surprising, that one. The
Yeah.
Sharks kept their season alive, just getting over the line against Frankston. Coburg very close to getting that first win. They were only a goal down late in that piece before Port Melbourne kicked the last one. The Suns over the Lions, that was a cracking result, which left the Lions' top 4 hopes in jeopardy. We'll talk about how they got it back a little bit later on. And Sydney, well, that was a red letter day for the Swans down near the bottom of the ladder. They finally reproduced the form that saw them make the top 4 last season with a big, big win over what was a very disappointing Essendon. But you're exactly right. Williamstown over Casey by a point was the one that really made people sit up and take notice and say, hey, the Seagulls are the real deal this year.
Definitely. And it's great to see an unattached side playing so well for sure. So jump to round 20, still three more to go. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry that this took so long, but it's great to catch up and to see everything that happened. And again, Brandon showing how awesome he is. He can recall over a month back ago. So really quickly back there. So round 20 sees Southport with an 8-point win over Essendon, 87-79. Footscray with a nice win over North Melbourne, 121-55. Sydney keeping its electric form with a 145-67 win over their Sydney rivals GWS. Williamstown keeps it rolling with an 83-63 win over Richmond. Werribee knocks off Collingwood 93-58, and Sandringham with a 99-point win over the Northern Bullants, 131-32. Some cracking games here, but that Southport Essendon matchup, again, Southport trying to stay with their finals chances.
Yeah, and Essendon doesn't mind travelling to Fankhauser Reserve. They've now played 3 games against Southport at Southport for I think a 4-point loss, a 2-point win, and now an 8-point loss. So that's the game that you really want to circle in the calendar when it comes up, if it comes up next year. We certainly hope it does. At this stage, there's 2 teams that don't play each other for the season, which again we'll touch on a little bit later on.
Mhm.
Footscray kept on rolling. They're on their way to a 10-match winning streak that they are currently sitting on. That's won them their spot in the finals. North Melbourne, remember that win over Geelong back in round 16? They're still
Mhm.
waiting for their next one as their spot,
Boy.
as their push for top 4 becomes a fight just to stay in the top 10. The Swans, well, I said it was a red letter result against Essendon. Well, nothing really tops knocking your little brother out of finals contention, which is exactly what happened in that game. And Werribee, well, they're on their way to a 15-match winning streak heading into the finals, and they put paid to Collingwood very easily there. They think they led 39-0 early in the second quarter before just cruising home.
Yeah, definitely for sure. We'll jump to it. Round 21, still 2 rounds to go. Sees the Suns knock off the Swans 122-54. The Seagulls strong again, beating the Lions. Gotta say, this is a shocker. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this result. A 90-84 win over the Brisbane Lions in Queensland. Even more impressive. Collingwood with a win over Geelong 129-55. GWS beat the Northern Bullants 131-55. Frankston beat the Coburg Lions 66-30. Footscray, as you said, on their nice little winning streak with a 20-point win over the Box Hill Hawks 76-56. Richmond knocking off Port Melbourne 72-51, and Carlton beating the KC Demons 77-69. And I mean, there's no way not to circle it. The Brisbane Lions falling at home to Williamstown. I mean, how impressive was that win?
Probably even more so than the one at Casey 2 weeks earlier. This is where Williamstown actually moved into the top 4 with this particular victory, tipped the Brisbane Lions out. The Lions hadn't been out of the top 4 for the entire season, and now they find themselves with 1 round to go, down in 5th spot on the ladder. And what made this one even better was the Seagulls were actually 19 points up early in the second quarter. They got overhauled. They were 2 goals down 7 minutes into the last, and came back kicking. What did they kick? One, two, three of the last 4 goals to secure what was an unbelievable victory, and just showed once again they've beaten a top 4 quality team away from home. And yeah, look out, here comes Williamstown. That's about to change, of course.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. The preemptives, I
Coburg,
love it.
yeah, Coburg very disappointing against Frankston. They hadn't lost to Frankston at home since 2007. So to go down in that manner, 66-30, really hurt them, and they had penciled that one as a golden opportunity to have a victory for the season. Footscray, real red letter win, that one over the Box Hill Hawks at Box Hill, and again that is where pretty much they secured their top 6 berth. They obviously got it the week after, but beating the Hawks, a top 4 team there, got it done. And Carlton, well, we thought they were going to miss the finals. But they knocked off Casey at home in the last game of the round, and all of a sudden they look safe.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what happened in round 22.
And round 22, the end of the regular home and away season sees Box Hill beat Frankston 105-66. The Gold Coast Suns with a hiding over Carleton 149-22. Footscray beat Port Melbourne 107-35. Geelong beat the GWS Giants 92-78. Collingwood beat the Southport Sharks 108-58. Essendon with a nice little win over Coburg 185. Richmond beating the North Melbourne Roos 88-76. Brisbane surviving at Casey by 2, 80-78. Werribee with a nice win over Sydney 89-56. And as you kind of forecasted a little bit, Sandringham with a nice little upset over Williamstown, 102-67. But I mean, it's hard not to say. Casey again with another loss at home in Brisbane, surviving a trip to Casey.
Well, yeah, we go into this final round. Let's set the picture. Williamstown are fourth, Brisbane Lions are fifth. So for the Lions to get fourth spot back, they need to win at Casey, which is normally impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And then they needed Williamstown to lose to a Sandringham side that had only won 4.5 games for the entire season, having Williamstown having just beaten Brisbane away and Casey away. Of course, as you just said, both those things happened. Brisbane was actually 33 points behind Casey in the second quarter and ran them down and won the game in an absolute thriller. That was one that I was lucky enough to call. So they put themselves back in the top four. At the same time, Sandringham had kicked 6 goals to nothing in the first quarter against Williamstown. And amazingly, the Zebras haven't lost to the Seagulls anywhere since 2018. And every single one of those results have been similar style, massive upsets. When Sandringham, you go in and you think they've got no right to win this game on form, on ladder position, on anything, and they've done it every time. So Williamstown go down to their bunnies. They lose the double chance. They drop to fifth on the ladder. They get a home elimination final, of course, but I'm sure they would have much preferred to have the double chance and go up to Queensland again to play the Suns. A couple others to touch on. You went into the last round just quickly. Coburg was still looking for their first win of the season, all over at quarter time against Essendon, 6 goals to nothing down. They fought back to lose by 15 points. It was their highest score of the season, so a good effort for 3 quarters. Disappointing other than that. Footscray was sitting 7th and Casey was 6th. So the Bulldogs needed a big win over Port Melbourne to replace the Demons in the top 6 and put the pressure back on Casey. Again, that's exactly what happened. They won by 72 points. Casey had to win by 12, and they obviously couldn't do it. They had it well and truly locked away, but then the pressure got too much for them and they fell over. The other key one was heading into the last round. Carlton, Collingwood and North Melbourne were 8, 9 and 10. 10 wins and 7 losses. Richmond was 11th, 9 wins, 7 losses and a draw. So Carlton's playing Gold Coast away. They're 3% ahead of Collingwood. That's your goal difference sort of thing for those in the US who aren't quite sure. So they were about 6 or 7 goals ahead of Collingwood. Collingwood in turn was about the same margin ahead of North Melbourne. So the margin from Carlton to North Melbourne was about 13 goals. And North Melbourne was playing against Richmond. So effectively it was, if Carlton doesn't get belted, they are safe. They're going to play finals. And the Sunday game, the last day of the season, the winner of North Melbourne and Richmond would be in and the loser would be out. 149-22 for the Suns. That is the biggest loss in Carlton's VFA VFL history. They lost 11 percentage points and they went into the last day from 8% in front of North Melbourne. They were 3% behind. And that's exactly how it stayed. Richmond got the win, so they came into the top 10. North Melbourne didn't lose by enough for their percentage to drop down, so they hold on to their spot in the finals. Carlton go from 8th to 11th and absolutely blow it and their season's over. So
Insane.
around 22 to savour right across the board.
Insane. So just real quickly before we move on to the women's, we will say this. We will again, we will preview the finals. We'll go through it. But the 10 teams to make the finals in the VFL: North Melbourne, Richmond, Collingwood, Casey, Footscray, Williamstown, Brisbane Lions, Box Hill Hawks, Werribee Tigers, and Gold Coast Suns round out the 10 teams vying for a premiership. So we will jump from the men's again. Unfortunately, due to a few things out of control here, we're going to go back and cover the VFLW's finals and everything that has happened here. And I cannot wait to hear how you think about this, Brendan, because this was quite the exciting final. Some really good results, some really close games. I cannot wait for this. So we'll go back to the first week of the finals. Sees Box Hill fall to Essendon 31-21. Again, Essendon, a strong team there. Collingwood with a win over Port Melbourne 48-22. Keep an eye on that result because it makes things really interesting a little bit later. And Carlton knock out Williamstown 22-18. Your thoughts on these first three games of the first round? Because some cracking games here, some really, really good results.
Well, remember the last time we spoke is obviously quite a while ago now, and a fair bit has happened, which I apologise for, but was out of control. And I
Mhm.
do send my love up there to my pop, who we lost over the past few weeks, which is why we've had the delay. So just an absolute legend of a man, great fella, and he's the reason why I am who I am. So it's been a really tough time. So that's why we haven't come back and touched on this. But a top six in the VFLW competition. Collingwood and Port Melbourne were first and second at the end of the home and away series. The Magpies won that one easily at Victoria Park. They were never challenged. The other two games, third versus sixth and fourth versus fifth, amazingly, were both won by the lower ranked side. So Essendon fifth knocked out Box Hill fourth, and Carlton sixth knocked out Williamstown third. That was Essendon and Box Hill, two power clubs over the last couple of years. Carlton and Williamstown playing finals for the first time ever. So terrific results there. Heartbreak for Williamstown after winning. I think they won 6 games in a row to make the finals, but just couldn't get over the line in a thriller. So that was the way it fell. The upsets continued, the close games continued, and yeah, we were just set up nicely. Essendon from fifth spot managed to get a double chance.
Hmm. It's kind of crazy to think about it, but again, I mentioned there's a couple of results that it's interesting, and I'm fascinated because we moved to the semifinals where Collingwood knock out Essendon, which I think is a little bit of shock because if I remember your tipping correctly, and I know it's a little while ago, you had Essendon winning this entire thing. Collingwood knocks them out in the semifinals 22-18 in a cracking 4-point win there. But Port Melbourne with a 1-point win over Carlton after losing in the first game and with that double chance, they survive and move on with a 1-point win over Carlton 37-36.
Well, Essendon aren't cooked yet.
Nope, not
They're
yet.
still alive because that was a second semi final. So I think I had Essendon going all the way to the grand final
Hmm.
and losing to Collingwood on that last day of the season,
Yep.
if I remember correctly. But Essendon went within 4 points of going from fifth straight into a grand final. That's why we rate them so highly and why they're such a terrific team. They couldn't quite get it done there. And Port Melbourne, at the third time of asking, won their first ever final. They made the finals in their first season and lost first up. They lost their first final convincingly in this final series. Scraped over the line there against the Blues to just keep the season alive and move through to a preliminary final in what was a lot of people described as one of the games of the season, that game between the Borough and the Blues.
Yeah, definitely. It was very interesting keeping an eye on those results and fascinating and to see what happens as the rounds go on is even more entertaining. So we jump to it. The other preliminary final to set up who is going to play Collingwood in the grand final. And I had to say this was a shocker as Port Melbourne with a 30-point win over the Bombers, 41-11. how shocking was this that Port Melbourne take Essendon's spot and join Collingwood in a grand final?
Would have knocked me down with a feather. With all due respect, the Bombers, remember, finished fifth and Port Melbourne finished second. So in a normal season, you wouldn't be surprised that the team that finished second has worked their way back through the final series to make the grand final. But they were playing against the reigning premiers in the Bombers, a team with all this finals experience, who've been there, done that, know how to get it done, and Port themselves had only just won their first ever finals match, and yeah, there was thoughts that they could potentially win the Borough, but certainly not by 5 goals. That one just really blew most people away, and I don't think anyone really tipped it outside the four walls of Port Melbourne.
Yeah, definitely. And even more as we look on to the grand final, as we see the upsets continue as Port Melbourne knock off Collingwood in the grand final. The premiers for the VFLW are the Borough of Port Melbourne 35-23. I watched this grand final, a heck of a game. And all hat tips to Port Melbourne, because I think if you would have told me this at the start of the finals that Port Melbourne would win the grand final, I probably would have asked you what particular drug you were taking, because Collingwood was so strong. I was not expecting this, but Port Melbourne found a way to get it done.
They certainly did, and what a performance! They just know how to win grand finals. The Port Melbourne Football Club, it's ingrained in their culture. They're the most successful VFA VFL club of all time with 17 premierships. The last two times they played in a grand final, 2011 and 2017, in the men, they won them. So they just know when it gets to grand final day, it's a 50-50 game. And if we work harder and do everything right, there's no reason why we can't win. Remember, this is only their third year in the competition, and they entered this final series having never won a final. And they've picked up 3 consecutive wins against the 3 biggest clubs in
Mhm.
the AFL, but the 3 biggest Melbourne clubs in the AFL, in Carlton, Essendon, and Collingwood, to take out this Rebel VFLW Premiership. Collingwood kicked the first goal very early on, and
Mhm.
we just thought, here we go. It might be another big result for the Magpies, but Port Melbourne got it back straight away. They kicked a couple more and found themselves 14 points up in the second quarter. And apart from a very brief period in the third, there was nothing more that could be done, and Port Melbourne led the rest of the way right through to the end. And then, with less than a minute to go, a Hail Mary kick in towards full forward, and the big ruck, Beth Wilson, reached above the pack, took a huge mark, contested mark, 5 metres out, straight in front, went back and kicked the goal with 25 seconds remaining, and basically sent red and blue into raptures. And yeah, what a performance, what a win. And just some wonderful performances. Lauren Caruso, who was actually an emergency for Essendon's premiership last year, moved across to Port Melbourne this season and won the Hardiman medal for best player on the ground in the grand final. So how's that for a story of redemption?
I love it. Absolutely love it. I love those stories. Fantastic. And the fact she gets a premiership medal and BOG, absolutely fantastic. So, again, it was great seeing this. I kept an eye on every single one of these games. Fantastic footy. I'm loving it. And with the upcoming AFLW season, this was just a nice little appetizer to get us ready for that. So we'll jump into it. Let's preview the finals. Now, I got to say this, Brendan, I'm going to be honest. How are they doing this finals when it comes to men's? Because I've seen 8, I've seen 5, I've seen 4. I've never seen 10. How are they doing this finals? Just really quickly, and a quick preview of what we should expect as the finals start this weekend, with 2 games to start off this weekend.
Well, I've never seen 10 either, so it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. But The wild card round is obviously a concept that has been taken from American sport.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what happens here is seventh on the ladder will play 10th, and eighth will play ninth. That's what's happening
Gotcha.
this week.
Okay.
So the Casey Demons, the reigning premiers, finished seventh after losing their last three games. North Melbourne, as we spoke about earlier, have finished 10th after losing their last four games and having not won a game since round 16. Um, they're playing in the VFA VFL finals for the first time since 1922, would you believe? Of
Mhm.
course, there was roughly 95 years when they weren't in the competition. So, but we just push that aside. Uh,
We'll just
I,
leave
I
that
love
alone.
I
We'll
love
just
the
leave
old
that alone.
stat.
Shh.
Yeah, I love the old stats when you can bring up from the original early eras of the competition and say it's been this long. And there's another one coming up that I'll give you in a second for the same reason.
Fantastic.
Um, yeah, so 7 versus 10, Casey versus North Melbourne. 8 versus 9, Collingwood and Richmond. Collingwood couldn't play this game on their home ground because Victoria Park has been aerated and resurfaced and reseeded and set up
Mhm.
for the AFLW season, which is approaching. So they've had to give up home ground advantage. So it will be played on Richmond's home ground, the Swinburne Centre. Now, normally you would think that's giving up a massive advantage to the Tigers.
Mhm.
Collingwood has not lost at the Swinburne Centre since the 11th of August. Are you ready for it?
Oh boy.
1894.
I love it. How long since it's been since they've played on the Swinburne Center?
They've actually played four times in the modern era, and Collingwood has won those games by 5 points, 4 points, 2 points, and 3 points.
All we need is a 1 point
So,
win here, and we've got the gamut.
yeah, so we're expecting a thriller. We're definitely expecting a thriller, but Collingwood, yeah, they've only ever lost at this ground twice in 1892 and 1894,
Mhm.
which were the first 3 years of the Magpies' existence. So they certainly won't be afraid of coming to Punt Road, even though all four of those games were decided by under a kick.
Yeah,
Um,
that's just
and
mental.
and you did ask how the rest of the final series works. Now, the highest ranked winner of these two games, so assume the two highest ranked teams win, which is Casey and Collingwood.
Hmm.
Um, the highest ranked winner will play the sixth place team, which is Footscray,
Hmm.
at at a ground of Footscray's choosing, because the Bulldogs don't have a home ground this year. It's been resurfaced. So it's been out of action for the whole year. So it's a great effort for them to win 10 games in a row and finish in the top six without playing any home games.
Hmm.
The lowest ranked winner will go and play Williamstown at Williamstown, with the Seagulls having finished fifth. And then it's a normal top eight. So
Okay.
from the second week of the finals, it's a normal top eight. So assume the two higher ranked teams win, you would have Williamstown versus Collingwood and Footscray versus Casey. We've already locked in the qualifying finals for the following week. Great little song, that one.
Hmm.
Um, we've already locked in the qualifying finals for the following week. 1v4, which is a Q clash, the Gold Coast Suns versus the Brisbane Lions. Look out for that. That should be an
That
absolute
should be an
cracker.
animal of a
And
game
second
there.
versus third, Werribee versus the Box Hill Hawks. Second versus third. That'll be at Avalon Airport Oval next week. Werribee on a 15-match winning streak heading into that game against the Hawks should be a beauty as well.
And then that should be that'll be your double chance, like your normal eight that we're used to when it comes to the AFL
Yes,
finals, correct? Okay. So
correct.
I'm this is going to be fascinating. I'm how much I don't mind the wild card round in this situation because there's so many teams in the VFL,
Yeah,
but I I kind of agree with some of the people I've talked to. I'm not sure I like the AFL version of it because there's only 18 teams, and for me, not every year you're going to get this drama around 8 to 12. I think there's some years where there really are only 8 teams that should be playing finals. So as much as I don't mind the American occasional wild card, I kind of like the old eight. So we will do it. I'm going to test you a little bit here to see if you can remember it real quick. We're going to I'm going to have you tip the finals. I want to know how you think this is going to go out. Who you think is going to win the premiership? So really quickly, let's go through the first two games of this weekend. So not only are we doing tips, but then let's kind of play out the finals and see how they go. So I will try to keep track as best I possibly can on how this is going. So I'm going to
Yeah,
pull up the ladder here so I can see if I can get the matchups correctly. And conveniently, when you go to the ladder on the VFL thing, it goes to the AFL ladder. Doesn't help me.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Ju-
So the first two
While you're
games.
getting that right, I will talk very quickly about the potential for the wild card in the AFL. This weekend in the AFL, as you might know, the Western Bulldogs are the only team that can sneak in to the top eight.
Mhm.
If they had the wild card, the Bulldogs and Essendon would currently be still in the finals. Geelong, Richmond, and Adelaide would all still be alive.
Yep.
So how exciting would round 24 be? But we'll just leave that aside for now.
Yeah, we'll leave definitely leave that aside for sure. All righty. So
uh,
as we said, so the first two games of the finals sees first would be Richmond Collingwood. So your thoughts on who you think will come up with the win on this one?
I think Richmond's had a couple of big name retirements, as you might know, out of the AFL team last week, being Jack Revolt and Trent Cotchin. They've rested Dion Prestia as well for their round 24 AFL game, which will really affect the strength of the VFL team because obviously players have to go up to take their spots. While everyone is still available, there's no finals qualifications for these games because the AFL is still in action and all the clubs' AFL teams are still playing, so they can pick anybody. Technically, Richmond could pick Revolt and Cochin,
Mhm.
but they're not. They're not going to do that. It'd be amazing if they did. Neither of them have played at this level for over 13 years. I expect Collingwood to win for that reason. They do have a few injuries on their own, but they're in good form, and I think they might be a little bit too strong for the Tigers.
All righty. And then Casey Demons v North Melbourne Rouge.
Neither team going that well, as we touched on earlier. 3 losses in a row for Casey, 4 losses in a row for North. I think Casey's form, though, has still been a little bit better. Those losses at home have been by 1 point and 2 points. They've never lost anywhere to the Kangaroos. They're 5-0, having won most of those games by big margins. They got an average winning margin of 64 points against North. So I think they should be too strong. Casey, the reigning premiers, will keep going.
Alrighty, so that leads. Okay, so Casey and Collingwood move on. So if I heard you correctly, that would make Collingwood face Williamstown and Casey face Footscray, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll actually let's start with the elimination final. So that was the Williamstown host Collingwood and Footscray host Casey. So first, Williamstown v Collingwood. Who do you think moves on?
I'm backing Williamstown. Main reason being that home ground advantage there at DSV Stadium at Point Gellibrand. They are very, very hard to beat there. Collingwood hasn't won there for many, many, many years. Um, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's way back in the early days as well. I do remember it when they played a few weeks ago. I did have that stat. I could be 130 years since Collingwood's won at Williamstown, and I don't think that'll change. I think the Seagulls will be ready for this and we'll go forward.
All right, Footscray v Casey Demons. Who gets the win in this one?
I honestly reckon that outside of Gold Coast and Werribee, these are the next two best credentialed teams to win the premiership. Footscray, as we know, are on a 10-match winning streak. They're absolutely flying. They're doing it without a home ground. The Casey Demons are the reigning premiers. They're not going that well. I think they'll get their form back against North Melbourne. Very hard to call because we don't know where the game is going to be played. So I can't sort of suss out that sort of advantage that it might go for. But um, it's very hard to pick against Footscray at the moment with a 10-match winning streak. So I'm going to say that the Bulldogs might get it done.
Awesome, awesome. So that Williamstown and Footscray now await the losers of the qualifying finals. We'll start with the Q Clash, absolute magnificent game between Brisbane and Gold Coast. Can the Suns send the Lions into an elimination game, or can the Lions go on the road and get a nice little upset and send the Suns into the elimination part of the bracket?
To be honest with you, when they played in their Q Clash a few weeks ago and they were the top two teams in the competition, it just looked like it was how far these two teams. In fact, the VFL announced that if Gold Coast and Brisbane Lions both made the grand final, it would be relocated and played up in Queensland,
Hmm.
um, which is still the case now that the
Hmm.
Lions have got their top four spot back. It's impossible to pick against the Gold Coast Suns at the moment.
Hmm.
Although, same story. The Suns AFL team is about to finish up. They're playing their last game this weekend. They've put 3 players out to pasture for the season. So that pulls 3 players up out of the VFL, including the leading goal kicker. One of the 2 Frosty Miller medalists in Chris Burgess has gone up to play AFL. But he will be back next week if he doesn't get injured, of course.
Hmm.
I think the Suns win mainly because the Lions might rest a few in that AFL bye week, just so they've got a full squad fresh for their AFL qualifying final. So the
Makes sense.
Suns to win for me.
All right, so Suns to win. Now, I cannot wait to hear this. The Werribee Tigers v Box Hill Hawks, who joins the Gold Coast Suns in the preliminary finals.
Once again, when you've got a team that's won 15 games in a row, it's pretty hard to go against them. This will also be a milestone game for Werribee. Matt Hanson, a legend of the club and of the competition. He's won 4 Club Best and Fairest awards. I think he's been in the VFL Team of the Year 4 or 5 times as well. He plays his 100th game in this qualifying final. So a fantastic career he's had. I think they get over the line regardless, but a little bit extra motivation will certainly help them along. I, Box Hill is capable. Don't get me
Mhm.
wrong; they are very capable. But I just think the Tigers have got more weapons all the way around the ground. And once again, with Hawthorn being finished, how many players drop
Mhm.
back to the Box Hill team? Do they drop enough players back to have a real crack at the VFL Premiership? Or do they start preparing for 2024?
Yeah, definitely for me interesting to see. So if I do it like the AFL, that should see Brisbane Lions v Williamstown in the semifinal and Footscray versus Box Hill. If I do this correctly. So well let's go with Box Hill Footscray. Who do you think survives and moves on to a to a preliminary final?
Well, we actually just saw Footscray beat Box Hill by 20 points at Box Hill in round 21, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
So wide open there, wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Hawks, they will be desperate to beat Werribee to avoid this matchup. I can, again, no disrespect to Box Hill, but I can see them having finished third being unlucky enough to have come up against 15 wins in a row in the qualifying final and
Mm-hmm.
then 11 wins in a row in the semi final. And if that's the case, will Box Hill be ready for what Footscray will bring after having seen it 3 weeks ago, or will Footscray just roll on? I'm go and as I said before, I reckon Footscray is right up there with the top 2 teams. So I'm going for the Bulldogs to put the Hawks out in straight sets.
All right. Hawks out in straight sets. So that would send Footscray to play Gold Coast in one preliminary final. Let's set up the other one. Who does Werribee play? Williamstown v Brisbane Lions. This will most likely be up in Queensland. Who do you like in this one?
I think the Brisbane Lions bounce back. Though we do know again in round 21, Williamstown did go up there and get the points, and in a repeat dose on this occasion, I'd be more confident in the Lions being able to answer that challenge and take down the Seagulls up there in Queensland. It'd be a monumental effort if Williamstown could beat Brisbane in Brisbane twice in the space of 4 weeks. So
Mhm.
I'm going for the Lions to stay alive and take on the Tigers.
All right, so that sees Footscray versus Gold Coast in the first preliminary final. Who's stamping their mark into the grand final?
What a game. What a game. And it could very easily be a grand final matchup. Um, Once again, up in Queensland, you've got to go for the Suns. Um, you're going to be looking at a team that has lost only 2 games for the year by 2 points and 1 point versus a team that's potentially on a 12-match winning streak. Um, yeah, so it's almost one worth flying up to Queensland to see. It should be an absolute ripper, but I'm going for the Suns. I think they're just marching on nicely, and Footscray, their poor start to the season when they played all the top teams early on and got cleaned up, might eventually catch up with them there. And I think the Suns beat the Bulldogs by about 70 up there earlier on in the season when they weren't going that well. So Gold Coast for me.
Another great one. The other preliminary final sees Werribee v Brisbane. Can Brisbane make it an all Queensland grand final, or can Werribee spoil the Queensland party?
They definitely can. The Lions. They would definitely be good enough, especially if the AFL team is still in business. Now, remember though, with the differences in the finals, if this is a preliminary final matchup and the Brisbane Lions AFL team is also in a preliminary final, this would be a week off for the AFL team,
Mhm.
which would make a lot of quite a few AFL players potentially ineligible to play in the VFL game. If they've played too many games in the AFL, they can't play in the VFL unless both teams are playing on the same day.
Mhm.
So that makes the job a bit harder for the Lions. And in that case, I am going for a 1v2 grand final, Gold Coast versus Werribee.
All right, and we'll do it. Grand final, Suns, Tigers. Who's holding up a premiership after the time expires?
In this case, the game would be played in Melbourne at Icon Park at Carlton, which is certainly a help for Werribee. Haven't won a premiership since 1993, which is their only one in the VFL, in the VFA VFL for Werribee. Gold Coast, as we know, haven't won any premierships, and this is their first minor premiership at any level. So someone is going to break through. And how great would that be if it turns up that way? And you would expect a big crowd at Icon Park on the day. Um, you may see some Suns supporters come down, but you'd reckon Werribee will completely empty out if the Tigers make this grand final. Um, tough call, but I might go for the fairy tale. I might go for the fairy tale and think that Werribee may just sneak it in and break this 30-year premiership drought. They celebrated the 30th anniversary a few weeks ago, and yeah, I think 30 years you see a lot of droughts break around about that time, and yeah, I'm going for the Tigers.
Awesome, awesome. So Werribee will be the one raising the flag at the end of the year. Love it. Absolutely love it. I cannot wait for this. This is going to be a cracking final. I think there's some incredible storylines going into it. Again, I know this has been a lot to digest because there's been so much going on. And again, I've told Brendan this before. Again, my thoughts and condolences to you and your family, unfortunately, over the loss of your father again. Your strength has been fantastic. I'm glad I've been able to keep in touch with you. I know in such a hard time, and I wanted to be as respectful about this as possible. So I know this is a lot in the podcast, but I wanted to be able to have a good mate be able to have his time to grieve what is never an easy situation. Unfortunately, I lost my father a couple of years ago to cancer as well, so I know exactly what he's going through. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And again, Brendan, fantastic job as always. It is so much fun to talk VFL with you. Such a wealth of knowledge. I genuinely appreciate having a sit down chat with you, sir.
Thanks very much, Donnie. It's been fantastic, and we've actually got through it quicker than we have than we have in the past with more games to cover. But but no, we've seen a fantastic season. I'm sure we'll talk again, possibly in the lead up to the to that grand final. Whoever is playing, I look forward to that. It's all for that fellow who's up there looking down for us. And if we don't speak again before too much longer, you'll be able to hear me very soon on the AFLW on the live streaming in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that.
Fantastic. Absolutely love it. Cannot wait. I'm thoroughly excited. I just put out our AFLW preview with the Soaring to New Heights podcast, the Hawthorne podcast. Liam is fantastic. What an incredible chat he was. It was nearly 2 hours, but it was so much fun to be able to let these women get a little bit of time to be able to kind of discuss everything that has happened because it's been such an insane off season. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our show today. Again, keep an eye out. VFL finals gonna be fantastic. And we also coming very, very soon next week, Waffle and Sandful are about to start their finals after this round. So 2 more episodes coming out next week covering the finals starting in the 2 other state leagues. I know it's kind of bittersweet getting to the end of my state league coverage for this season, but it's been an absolute blast. So that's going to do it for me on Donnie's Disposals. Thank you again for watching. And again, more coverage of footy coming and AFLW coming very, very soon. That'll do it for us. We will see you again very, very soon.